Time now to welcome our very first guest onto Manchester Headline News. Dan Mortell is from a company called UKopia, who are trying to set up Greater Manchester's first ever wildlife park, but it's a wildlife park with a little bit of a twist. Dan, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us all about UKopia.
Okay, so UKopia is a brand new concept in wildlife park, specialising purely on UK wildlife, but going back from today all the way back to the Ice Age, with covering extinct animals such as the woolly rhinoceros, which I know you'll probably find quite strange that we can do that, but we'd look to do kind of digital displays. We'd also go right the way through to extant animals, which are animals that still exist but not in this country anymore. So things like the lynx and wolves, bears. We would also look to showcase the best of UK wildlife currently, animals that you don't really see, such as the pine marten and the ever declining red squirrel. And then we would look to have a real kind of strong conservational element with release back into the wild for
now,
animals.
This wildlife park, and we're keen to stress it is going to be a wildlife park, is going to be crowd-funded, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. That wasn't the original intention, actually. The original intention is to secure a large funding partner. And that might still be the case. However, just to kind of accelerate the programme, we have opened it up to crowdfunding, yeah.
So, just so that I understand this, because I'm sure a lot of people will be having similar thoughts. Yeah. Wildlife Park, Salford Wildlife Park. Where does that kind of come together?
The reason that Salford is a good location actually is because the Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire are the only two populations of over 1 million without a wildlife park. So there's currently 2.7 million people sitting in Greater Manchester. Salford sits in the key area in regards to population of Greater Manchester for surrounding purposes. There's also 12.1 million people in surrounding counties, so the neighbouring counties, and Manchester has the second most amount of tourists after London. So it makes perfect sense for a wildlife park to be here.
So was this the idea that sort of came to you after a few down the pub, or has this been a long-held dream, and what's your background?
So my background is recruitment. I run a large recruitment operation. The reason why I'm interested in this kind of thing is because I'm also a wildlife photographer and have been for many years. I have a keen interest in animals, in most cases prefer them to people. It became clear to me when I was coming back to the UK from a trip abroad to see another zoo, that actually Manchester and Greater Manchester doesn't have a lot of large visitor attractions, which is strange considering if you go to London and there's many attractions to go to. You go to many smaller cities in Europe and there are many attractions to go to. And other than sport and shopping and a few museums, I don't see that much in Greater Manchester. So for me, I kind of started thinking, well, we need something. And that kind of then ties into my long-term conservational beliefs. So after I've done some research and gone around the country to different zoos, different wildlife parks, different conservation centres, I've kind of pieced together that actually there's not a great deal of wildlife parks that are releasing animals back into the wild, especially UK-based species. And for me, when you look at the news constantly, last week it was announced that our hedgehog population has decreased from 32 million to 900,000. You know, and for me, if something doesn't happen, then we'll lose them forever.
Do you think it's a case perhaps that we're so busy pushing money to save the tiger, save the rhino, things like that, that potentially we're missing extinctions on our own doorstep? Yeah,
I think so. I think so. I mean, just to give you an idea, everybody in the country's seen a zebra. Only 5% of our population has ever seen a pine marten, and a pine marten is actually an indigenous species. So for me, it says the balance is wrong. There are a couple of good organisations in the south that are doing some work around conservation of UK species, but for me it needs to accelerate, it needs to get bigger. There's things that need to change. As I've gone around and done an analysis on these other wildlife parks, there needs to be mixed habitats for animals so that animals can live together as they do in the wild. There needs to be no cages, because if you want animals to be displayed in a natural habitat and to encourage them to behave in a natural way so that you can release them back into the wild, then there needs to be no cages. It needs to be natural barriers of streams, of rocks, of trees, which also works in benefit for everybody. So for the animals, they've got a natural surrounding and they can be reintegrated into the wild easier. For photographers like myself, you can go and you can actually see the animals properly. And for commercial reasons, it'll bring more people to the park.
You refer to sort of lynx, bears, wolves. What is the sort of period since extinction, or since, I think you called it, you used another word, extent. What is the period for those to present day? Every single species is different. So bears have not been in the UK for thousands of years. Wolves not far behind, actually. As far as UKopia goes, we would want to kind of engulf all of that together, because we want it to be a very strong educational resource. So a real kind of, let's showcase what's happened in the UK and the species that we've already lost. So if we're then going to talk about the species that we're in danger of losing, we'll talk about what we've lost already and really kind of highlight the impacts and the potential impacts of that. I also want to make sure that there are some strong conservation elements for things like bees that are also in danger now, and if bees go, we're all in trouble. So we'll go as far back as the Ice Age for digital display, obviously for animals that don't exist anymore. About this digital display then, how is that possible? Because I'm sure people listening will have visions of Jurassic Park in their head, but it's not going to be quite like that, is
it? Not quite Jurassic Park. However, as close to Jurassic Park as we can make it, the idea for me is that the park would have no cages other than the digital display, where obviously you'd look through a screen and you would see the animals in a mixed habitat, so things like woolly rhinoceros, woolly mammoth, extant, the great auk, and things like that, all kind of walking around in a habitat looking like it would have done in those times, and that'll be through kind of holograms and that kind of technology.
So realistically, when can we expect to see the wheels set further in motion?
Well, that all depends on the funding. If we find a funding partner or we're successful through the crowdfund, then I'd expect the first foundations to be laid within 3 years. If that isn't the case, then we do have some other potential routes, and you'll be looking between 5 and 10 years.
Dan Mortell from UKopia, thank you very much.
Thank you.